What you're about to hear is a story that has haunted North Carolina for over 2 decades. A 9-year-old girl named Asha Degree walked out of her home in the middle of a stormy February night and vanished into the darkness. She wasn't running from abuse, she wasn't lured online, and there was no forced entry. Her disappearance remains one of the strangest and most heartbreaking mysteries in American history. Tonight, we retrace her final steps, through the rain, down Highway 18, and into the silence that has never been broken. It was February 14, 2000, Valentine's Day, when 9-year-old Asha Degree disappeared from her home in Shelby, North Carolina. The night was cold, drenched in rain, and wind gusts strong enough to shake the small frame house where Asha slept. Her parents, Harold and Degree, went to bed believing their children were safe. By morning, their world would shatter forever. At around 2:30 a.m., Harold checked on his kids before going to sleep. Both Asha and her older brother O'Brien were in their shared room, sound asleep. But sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., Asha quietly got out of bed, dressed herself in jeans and a long-sleeved white shirt, picked up her black book bag, and walked out into the storm. She didn't take money or food, just a few personal belongings, a Tweety Bird purse, her school uniform, and a few pieces of candy. No one heard her leave. No one saw her open the front door. Her parents woke up around 6:30 a.m. to get the kids ready for school. When Akila entered the room, Asha's bed was empty. Her backpack was gone. The panic was instant. By 6:45, Harold was on the phone with the police. Within an hour, officers from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office were swarming the Degree home. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, and no footprints in the mud near the doorway, just emptiness. Then came the first eerie reports. 2 separate motorists, both strangers, told police they had seen a small figure walking along Highway 18, about a mile north of the Degree home, around 4 a.m. Despite the rain, she wasn't running or stumbling. She was walking steadily, alone. One driver circled back, concerned for her safety, but when he slowed down to offer help, the little girl bolted off the road and disappeared into the woods. By sunrise, the temperature had dropped, and search teams, police, volunteers, dogs, and helicopters fanned out across the area. They found no trace, not a footprint, not a thread of clothing. Only one thing was certain. Asha Degree had walked into that storm willingly, and whatever she was searching for, she never came back. The morning Asha disappeared, February 14, 2000, Shelby, North Carolina, awoke to chaos. By sunrise, Sheriff Dan Crawford had mobilized every available deputy. Word spread quickly. A 9-year-old girl had vanished in the middle of a thunderstorm. Neighbors, volunteers, and even church members poured into the streets, searching ditches and woodlines with flashlights. The Degree family was well known in their community. They were quiet, church-going people who valued discipline and education. Asha wasn't a troubled child. She was shy, respectful, and had no history of running away. That fact alone made her disappearance almost impossible to comprehend. Within hours, searchers found the first clues. About a mile from the Degree home, near the intersection of Highway 18 and Highway 180, they discovered a tiny hair bow lying in the mud, one her mother immediately recognized as Asha's. Not far from it, a candy wrapper and a pencil with her school's logo were found. Those small items told investigators one thing: she had really been there. By mid-morning, heavy rain turned dirt roads into rivers of mud. Helicopters circled overhead, while K-9 units attempted to pick up her scent. The dogs tracked her trail briefly, but it abruptly stopped near a turnoff toward the business district. That's where witnesses had seen her disappear into the trees before dawn. For her parents, the hours felt endless. "We thought maybe she was lost and scared," said her mother, Akila, in an early interview. "But as time went on, I realized something worse had happened." The police set up a command post at a nearby volunteer fire station. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Officers combed barns, abandoned buildings, drainage pipes, and every nearby home with permission. Nothing. No footprints. No clothing. no blood. Then late that afternoon, a chilling new piece of information came in. A truck driver named Jerry Burns had also seen the young girl on Highway 18 around 4:15 a.m. He described her as small, thin, carrying a backpack, and walking like she knew where she was going. That phrase, like she knew where she was going, haunted investigators for years. How could a child, terrified of the dark, leave her warm bed, walk through freezing rain in pitch-black conditions, and vanish without leaving a single trace? By nightfall, authorities expanded the search radius to 5 miles. They brought in dive teams to scour nearby ponds and creeks. Still no Asha. Theories began forming almost immediately. Some believed she'd been lured by someone she trusted. Others thought she had simply gotten lost and succumbed to the elements. But one thing didn't fit. Asha's shoes, candy wrappers and hair bow were found neatly along the roadside, not scattered, not torn, almost as if they'd been placed there deliberately. And if that was true, then someone else was out there, retracing her steps. By the second day of the search, the town of Shelby, North Carolina, was living a nightmare. Dozens of volunteers walked side by side through muddy fields and pine thickets, shouting Asha's name into the wind. News crews began arriving, broadcasting the small girl's picture across the state. Still, there was no sign of life, no footprints, no dropped belongings, no leads. At the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, detectives began looking inward. If Asha hadn't been kidnapped, then why had she left at all? Her parents, Harold and Asha Degree, were adamant their daughter wasn't the kind of child to run away. She was scared of dogs. She didn't like being alone in the dark, her mother told reporters. She would never walk out there by herself. That contradiction baffled investigators. What could drive a 9-year-old, happy, loved, and disciplined, to step out into a storm at 3 a.m.? Detectives started with the family home. There were no signs of forced entry. Asha's shoes and backpack were missing. Her small bed was neatly made. Inside her closet, her school uniform hung pressed and spotless. There was one subtle clue, a photo album missing from her shelf, along with some of her favorite candy bars. To police, that meant she had packed deliberately. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment escape. At Falston Elementary, detectives interviewed teachers and classmates. Friends described Asha as quiet but strong-willed. She loved basketball and reading. But a few mentioned something odd. She'd been upset after a recent basketball game where she'd fouled out and felt she had let the team down. Could a child's sense of shame drive her to run away? Maybe, but not through a thunderstorm, in total darkness, down a major highway. FBI profilers were called in to assist. Their analysis painted a picture of a bright, obedient child, possibly feeling internal pressure to live up to expectations. They theorized that she might have left voluntarily, not out of rebellion but to prove something. Perhaps she had planned a mini-adventure, believing she could return safely once she'd made her point. That theory gained traction after police found that Asha had been reading The Whipping Boy, a children's novel about a prince and his servant running away together to learn lessons about courage and freedom. The parallels were chilling. Still, detectives couldn't ignore the growing unease that something darker was unfolding. Witnesses had described Asha walking calmly, as if heading to a meeting point. When the FBI entered the case formally, they reclassified it as a possible abduction, despite the lack of evidence. "Kids that age don't vanish into thin air," said Special Agent Wesley Porter. "Someone knows what happened." The Degree family clung to faith, praying day and night for their daughter's safe return. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to blur with horror. Asha Degree hadn't just disappeared, she had walked into a void that refused to give her back. By the end of the first week, the search for Asha Degree had become the largest missing child operation in Cleveland County history. More than 9,000 man-hours had been poured into the search. Entire neighborhoods were combed, ponds were drained, and helicopters flew over the same stretch of highway every day. Yet not one confirmed sighting had surfaced since the stormy morning she vanished. Then, on February 17th, 3 days after her disappearance, investigators received a call that reignited hope and fear. A driver who'd been commuting along Highway 18 reported seeing a small object on the roadside near a tool shed just north of Shelby. When deputies arrived, they found something unmistakable: Asha's pencil, candy wrappers, and a green marker cap, all partially buried in the mud. Near the shed, there were tiny footprints, consistent with a child's size, and what appeared to be a small indentation in the ground, as if someone had sat there briefly. But the strangest detail came from the shed's owner, Jason Turner, who said he'd found the door slightly ajar that morning. "I thought maybe a stray dog got in," he told police, "but there was a little blanket inside, folded up like someone had laid there." Deputies took photos, collected soil samples, and brought in scent dogs. The dogs picked up a faint trail leading toward the woods behind the shed. And then nothing. The trail simply ended. That pattern, clues appearing and then vanishing, would define the entire case. The discovery sparked a wave of renewed energy. Flyers blanketed gas stations, post offices and storefronts from Shelby to Hickory. The FBI officially joined the investigation, working alongside local detectives. Agents canvassed hundreds of homes, questioned truck drivers, and even interviewed registered sex offenders in the region. Nothing pointed to a clear suspect. Meanwhile, rumors spread. Some residents whispered about a white car seen idling on Highway 18 the night Asha disappeared. Others mentioned a strange man asking about a little girl in the days before Valentine's Day. None of those tips held up under scrutiny. Still, one thing was clear. Asha had not simply wandered off and gotten lost. Every clue, her neatly packed bag, her deliberate route, the strange calmness described by witnesses, suggested she was following a plan. But a plan to meet who and why? Her mother couldn't shake the dread that someone had groomed Asha in secret. Perhaps someone from church, or someone she'd met in passing. She was trusting, Ikila said later. If someone told her it was okay, she'd believe them. Investigators knew this was now a race against time. Statistically, if a child wasn't found within 48 hours, the chances of recovery dropped sharply. But even with national attention and hundreds of volunteers, the trail was already cold. And then, almost a year later, a discovery hundreds of miles away would reopen the wound and deepen the mystery forever. In August 2001, more than 18 months after Asha Degree vanished, the case had gone quiet. Leads had dried up. The FBI had reduced its task force, and most of the volunteers had returned to their daily lives. Yet, for Asha's parents, every sunrise brought the same unbearable question: where is our daughter? Then, on August 3rd, 2001, a construction crew working on a Highway 18 expansion project near Morganton, about 26 miles north of Shelby, made a chilling discovery. While digging in a roadside embankment, one of the workers struck something soft beneath the dirt. He brushed away the soil and froze. It was a book bag, small, plastic-wrapped, and tightly sealed. When investigators arrived, they confirmed what the faded name tag already revealed. It was Asha Degree's backpack. The location made no sense. Asha had last been seen heading north, but the backpack was found in the opposite direction, far beyond where she could have possibly walked. The condition of the bag was even stranger. It had been intentionally buried, about 18 inches deep, and carefully wrapped in 2 layers of plastic trash bags, as if someone had wanted to preserve it. Inside were some of her personal items: clothing, school papers, and a copy of Dr. Seuss's McElligot's Pool, a book checked out from her school library shortly before her disappearance. The presence of that book was significant. It suggested Asha had packed her things herself before leaving. But who buried the bag, and when, remained a terrifying mystery. Forensic analysis revealed that the plastic bags had been manufactured locally, but no fingerprints or DNA were found. The soil suggested the backpack had been buried months after the disappearance, not immediately. That detail haunted investigators. If the bag was buried long after Asha vanished, it meant someone still had possession of it long after she disappeared. Someone who'd either known her or been involved in what happened that night. The discovery reignited the media storm. National outlets like America's Most Wanted and the Oprah Winfrey Show featured the case, leading to hundreds of new tips. But none brought clarity. To the Degree family, the backpack symbolized both hope and horror. It proved their daughter was real, tangible, but also that she'd fallen into someone's hands. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit began working on a new theory. Asha may have been abducted after leaving home voluntarily. Perhaps she'd planned to meet someone she trusted, a person who had carefully groomed her into believing she was safe. And when she got into that person's car, her story ended. The backpack was the last thing she ever left behind, and whoever buried it might still be out there, watching the world search for a ghost. By 2002, the FBI's behavioral analysts were convinced of one thing. Asha Degree hadn't been taken from her home by force. She had left willingly, at least at first. But the burning question was why. When agents revisited the evidence, they noticed patterns most people had missed. Asha's disappearance wasn't impulsive, it was methodical. She had packed her backpack carefully, choosing personal items, her school library book, and a few pieces of candy, enough for comfort, not survival. She had also hidden the bag where her parents wouldn't see it before leaving that night. That meant she'd been planning her escape, possibly for days. But what was she escaping to? Detectives scoured her diaries and school materials, hoping to find a name, a note, or even a drawing that suggested a meeting. Nothing. No letters, no suspicious phone calls, no internet use. This was the year 2000, and the Degree home didn't have internet access. At school, her teachers said Asha was bright, kind, and sensitive. She loved basketball and books. She didn't like disappointing people, especially her parents. The only recent event that stood out was a basketball game 2 nights before she disappeared. She'd fouled out, cried on the bench, and told her coach she felt she had ruined everything. It seemed like a small thing, a child's frustration. But some experts believed that humiliation, combined with the emotional intensity of Valentine's Day and a young child's imagination, might have pushed her toward a symbolic adventure. Perhaps, they theorized, Asha had been influenced by stories of independence and escape, especially The Whipping Boy, a book she'd recently read in school about 2 children who run away at night. The parallels were haunting. But there was still a chilling detail that contradicted this innocent explanation: the backpack's burial. If Asha had simply gone on a naive journey, who buried her bag months later? That act, careful, deliberate, indicated the presence of another person, someone who wanted to remove evidence without destroying it, someone who had time and confidence to hide it in a remote area far from the search zones. The FBI began quietly building a profile, an adult male, possibly familiar with the area between Shelby and Morganton, likely working in construction, trucking, or rural labor. Someone who might have crossed paths with Asha innocently, a neighbor, a church acquaintance, or a passing driver, and gained her trust. In public, the Degrees maintained faith that their daughter was alive. But privately, investigators began to admit the darker truth. Asha was likely lured, manipulated, and abducted. The night she stepped into the storm, she believed she was going somewhere safe, but whoever waited for her in that darkness, if anyone did, made sure she never returned. And the rain that washed away her footprints also erased the last trace of the truth. 2 decades after Asha Degree disappeared, her story still haunted the small town of Shelby, North Carolina. For her parents, every Valentine's Day brought the same ritual: church service, candlelight vigil, and tears. But for investigators, the 20th anniversary marked something else: renewal. In 2020, the FBI's Charlotte Field Office and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office officially reopened the case with a new task force. They re-examined every photograph, tip, and evidence file using modern forensic technology. Old fingerprints were reprocessed, witness statements digitally cross-referenced, and new DNA testing methods were applied to Asha's backpack and clothing. The result? Faint traces of unknown DNA, degraded but usable, were detected on one of the plastic bags that had wrapped her belongings. It wasn't a match to anyone in CODIS, the national DNA database, but it was proof of another presence. Someone had touched that bag. Meanwhile, investigators revisited dozens of old tips dismissed in the early 2000s. One in particular stood out, a report from 2 truck drivers who said they'd seen a young girl matching Asha's description getting into a dark green car along Highway 18, near where she was last seen. At the time, the sighting was considered unreliable. Now, with new mapping tools, detectives realized that the location matched the geographical direction of where her backpack was later buried. It was the first time in 20 years that the dots began to connect. Detectives also discovered something else. Phone records from that era showed a flurry of late-night calls between payphones located near the highway. One of them was less than 2 miles from the Degree home. While they couldn't prove Asha used it, the coincidence was chilling. By 2023, investigators publicly confirmed they were actively pursuing several persons of interest. Then, in early 2025, search warrants were issued for the phones of Roy Dedman and his 2 adult daughters, family members who lived near the area of interest at the time of Asha's disappearance. Court documents suggested investigators believed those devices might contain evidence of obstruction of justice in relation to Asha's case. When asked for comment, the Dedman family denied any connection. But the fact that, 25 years later, the FBI was still collecting evidence proved one thing: the case was not cold, it was alive. Behind the scenes, agents were working with digital forensics experts to recover deleted data from those phones, including text messages, images, and online activity. They also used ground-penetrating radar to rescan several rural properties near Lawndale and Morganton, but no remains were found. Yet each search revealed something else: hope. Every shovel of dirt, every new warrant, every lead was a reminder that someone, somewhere, knows exactly what happened to Asha Degree. And that person may still be walking free, watching the world remember the girl who vanished into the rain. While investigators chased every new lead, the Degree family continued their own search, not just for truth, but for meaning. For Harold and Aquila Degree, life had become a painful cycle. Every February brought another vigil, another round of interviews, and another year without answers. Yet through it all, they refused to let despair take root. Their home on Oakcrest Street became a shrine to hope. Framed photos of Asha still cover the living room walls. Her school trophies sit untouched, her smile frozen in time. "We've never changed her room," her mother said once. "We keep it the way she left it, just in case." Faith was their anchor. The Degrees are deeply religious, members of Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church, where the community still gathers each year for a candlelight vigil on Valentine's Day, the day she vanished. At each vigil, children her age would release balloons into the night sky, their bright colors fading into the same darkness Asha once walked into. Her parents would stand hand in hand as her father spoke softly, "God knows what happened. One day, he'll let us know too." But behind their strength, the pain never left. Aquila has said she blames herself for not checking her daughter's room earlier that night. Harold has admitted that every passing car, every unfamiliar face in town, makes him wonder, could they know something? The case changed not only the family, but the entire community. Shelby became a town defined by a single question: where is Asha Degree? Even new generations who weren't alive when she disappeared know her face. Her story is taught in schools, discussed at church gatherings, and used in law enforcement training on missing children cases. Despite the tragedy, the Degrees chose grace. Instead of anger, they built awareness. They launched the Asha Degree Foundation, dedicated to helping families of missing children and funding youth mentorship programs. "We couldn't save our daughter," Harold once said, but maybe we can help save someone else's. In the years since, that quiet strength has inspired thousands. The family's resilience turned Asha's story into more than a mystery. It became a movement. Still, at night, the questions return. What could make a child step into the storm? Who convinced her she'd be safe? And where is she now? Every year, new tips surface, dreams, visions, confessions from prison inmates, but none lead anywhere. The Degrees listen to each one, holding on to a fragile balance between hope and heartbreak. "I know my daughter is out there," her mother said. "Maybe not the way I want her to be, but she's out there, somewhere." And in Shelby, every February, as rain falls softly over Highway 18, her name echoes through the night, whispered by those who still believe that faith can outlast fear. 2.5 decades after Asha Degree vanished, investigators and amateur sleuths still can't agree on what really happened that night. Every theory reveals something different about the case and about human nature itself. The first theory, and the one most law enforcement officials lean toward, is abduction by a familiar predator. Asha, trusting and innocent, could have been groomed by someone she met through church, school, or the neighborhood. Someone who earned her confidence, who made her believe she was helping a friend or embarking on a secret adventure. This theory fits the evidence. Her calm demeanor on the highway, the lack of forced entry, and the buried backpack found miles away, too far for a child to reach alone. It also explains the deliberate concealment of evidence, suggesting the presence of an adult with local knowledge. The second theory is more tragic, that Asha's decision to run away was purely her own, and that she died accidentally soon after leaving home. Supporters of this theory point to her careful packing and childlike preparation, taking her favorite book, candies, and clothes. They believe she may have become lost, disoriented, or succumbed to the cold. Perhaps her remains were scattered or buried naturally over time in the thick North Carolina woods. But even this scenario fails to explain the plastic-wrapped backpack, the lack of remains, and the fact that her scent trail ended abruptly near a roadway. The third, and most controversial theory, is that Asha was the victim of organized trafficking or exploitation. Some investigators have speculated that someone may have targeted her deliberately, using manipulation or coercion. Asha's parents have firmly rejected this idea, but federal agents have not ruled it out completely, especially given the number of child exploitation cases later uncovered in the surrounding counties. There are also less conventional theories. Some locals still whisper about the man in the green car, a vehicle reportedly seen idling along Highway 18 the night she vanished. Others mention 2 men seen carrying a large duffel bag in the same area the following morning. None of these leads ever produced evidence. And then there are those who can't let go of the eerie, almost spiritual quality of Asha's case. They see symbolism in the date, Valentine's Day, a day of love and loss, and in her final steps into the storm. To them, Asha's disappearance feels like something otherworldly, a mystery caught between faith and fear, between innocence and the unknown. But for detectives like Detective Williams, who inherited the case decades later, there's nothing supernatural about it. "Someone took her," he said simply, "and someone out there still knows." Whether Asha left home to escape, to meet someone, or to prove something, her journey ended in silence. And for 25 years, that silence has been the loudest sound in Shelby. Time moves differently for families of the missing. For Harold and Aquila Degree, 25 years have passed since that stormy Valentine's night, but it might as well have been yesterday. The world moved on, but for them, time froze on February 14th, 2000, the night their little girl walked out of their lives and into history. Her room remains untouched. The same posters, the same neatly folded clothes, the same small trophies from her basketball team. Each morning, her mother still whispers a prayer before opening the curtains. "If she's out there," she says, "I want her to see the light." The case of Asha Degree has become more than a local tragedy. It's now a national symbol of how innocence can vanish without reason, and how determination can endure even longer than grief. Her story is studied in criminal psychology courses, discussed in conferences on missing children, and featured every year in true crime specials. The FBI and Cleveland County Sheriff's Office continue to treat the case as active. Search warrants are still issued, evidence is still retested with every new forensic technology that emerges. And each Valentine's Day, agents stand quietly among the crowd at the candlelight vigil, a silent promise that they have not forgotten. To this day, no one has been charged, no remains have been found, and no definitive answers have emerged. But in the stillness of the Shelby night, her name continues to echo. Asha's story has touched millions, not only because she vanished, but because of how she lived. She was careful, kind, and filled with curiosity about the world. And maybe that's what led her to open the door that night. A child's faith that the world beyond her home was safe, that people were good, that light existed even in darkness. Her parents choose to believe that light still shines somewhere. "We don't know how this ends," her father said, "but we know how it began, with love." And perhaps that's the cruelest truth of all, that the same love that made Asha trust the world may have led her straight into its shadows. Every February, rain falls again on Highway 18, and every year, as the candles flicker in the cold wind, the town of Shelby remembers the little girl who walked into the storm and never came back. Because in the story of Asha Degree, the rain hasn't stopped, and maybe it never will. If Asha's story moved you, don't let it fade. Share this video so her name continues to echo beyond the woods of North Carolina. Someone somewhere still knows what happened, and your share could be the one that reaches the truth. Subscribe for more stories that deserve justice, more voices that deserve to be heard, and more mysteries that still demand answers. Because every missing child deserves more than remembrance. They deserve resolution. Asha Degree, the backpack, the rain, the silence. We will never stop searching.